Hey guys, back here at the table with Amy Plano.
Good morning.
And we're going to look to answer a question that we get often as far as what we should eat post-workout. So Amy, lots of the times I hear a question is, what should I eat to refuel from a workout? And I know this can be, as with nutrition, a very in-depth conversation, and there's lots of moving parts to it, but if we had to think of like, all right, what are some key factors that people should be thinking about when they get done working out as far as what they should be eating, when they should be eating, and why?
Sure.
And I'm going to let you take it from here.
Thanks, man.
All right.
So a couple pieces of that. And so I think if we kind of group it in things we should be eating and when we should be eating it, and then talk about things we shouldn't be eating. Because that's one of the common things that I see is what people shouldn't be eating. But let's start with the positive. And so post-workout, you typically have what we would refer to as a window of opportunity. And as corny as that may sound, what that means is that you typically have about 30 to 45 minutes to optimize your kind of replenishment. And why that's important post-workout is when you finish a workout, the hormone cortisol is elevated. And cortisol is what we would consider a catabolic hormone. Okay, and so it means that the body's in breakdown mode. So post-workout, we want to make sure that we put something in our system. What do we put in? Well, we want to put in some form of protein, preferably a whey, which we talked about a couple episodes ago. And the reason why we want to go with a whey post-workout is because it's going to be the most rapidly absorbed. The second piece, which is equally as important, especially if your goal is for performance and you're going to be training the next day, is you need some form of what we would consider a high glycemic carbohydrate. Okay, and that's why a lot of CrossFitters, you probably see CrossFitters adding things like dextrose to their post-workout drink, things like sucrose to their post-workout drink, maltodextrin, even things like Vitargo. And then products like UCAN. And so why we see, the high elite athletes using these products is because that drives insulin up very quickly. So post-workout, in order to blunt that cortisol, which causes the body to go down breakdown mode, we need to have a carbohydrate and a protein. So, your best sources are, like I said, are typically going to be something that acts pretty quickly. Okay? But you have that window of opportunity. And like I said, I would try to get something in post-workout, no more than 60 minutes. And the reason why that, once again, is important is that your body's the most sensitive, okay? Things you shouldn't eat, okay? A lot of times I see people doing a boatload of fruit post-workout, okay? And the reason why fruit isn't a great choice as that carb with that protein is because fruit has a high amount of fructose. The only two fruits that aren't very high in fructose are bananas and grapefruits, okay? And why fructose wouldn't be a great choice like something like a dextrose or a multidextrose is because fructose comes in very slowly to the system. The second piece that you probably don't want to have in your post-workout shake is some type of fat, because fat slows everything down. So a lot of people will kind of put in a banana, some protein powder, and then some peanut butter. And that's great a couple hours after when you don't want everything to kind of happen so quickly. But post-workout, you do want to avoid the fat and if you can, the fructose. So once again, you're looking at that 60-minute kind of window.
Cool. So I think, okay, now talking about that window.
Yes.
I often see people get freaked out if they miss the window. What should people be considering? Sometimes they work out, they don't really come prepared.
Sure.
Then they kind of I just know some people have a tendency to be pretty regimented, and they almost feel like it's like an all or none type ordeal, right?
Absolutely.
So if someone's doing an intense workout,
yes,
okay, and they're in that lactate state,
sure,
should they eat immediately after, or should they wait till the body gets a little bit more relaxed, more into that parasympathetic state before they eat?
Good question. I mean, and to kind of address that issue of kind of freaking out, I didn't get in my post-workout meal. The body is pretty, resilient. And what that means is that when they look at studies with folks who are training, they tend to favor the post-workout meal. But with that being said, the easiest way to address that question is, what did they eat before they trained? If they didn't eat a protein and a carb an hour before they trained or an hour and a half, prior to training, they don't really have that pulse in insulin. They don't really have that pulse in terms of the peak of the protein. because you can have a meal a couple hours before, and it's typically not going to peak until 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. And so if that athlete, was regimented and they did have their pre-workout meal, that post-workout meal isn't as important, okay? But in terms of people in terms of the different systems, when the body is producing lactic acid, it's also producing usually norepinephrine, epinephrine, and then cortisol. And so you really want to blunt that as quickly as you possibly can, because along with lactic acid buildup, we also have, damage to the muscle. You know what I mean? So that's, it's not a bad thing, but we have to buffer that. And one of the good things with a lot of the post-workout drinks is that they have things like sodium, and they have all the electrolytes and things like that to kind of buffer any type of damage. The other thing that's really important when you do produce lactic acid, at a pretty high rate, is that your immune function can become compromised. That's why we see so many athletes who are high performers, we see them sick pretty often. And so that's where, the post-workout kind of meal comes in terms of elevating that cortisol, decreasing, the immune factors, and just kind of optimizing recovery. So in terms of, what system is operating, I just tend to be a big fan of, as quickly as they possibly can, get in some type of protein and carb.
So even if your body's still in like a stressed, active state, you don't think you don't need to completely rest until your body gets a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more able to digest food? Or is it, if it's something like a quick digestible food intake,
Absolutely.
It's okay to kind of take it in right away?
Absolutely. And so my biggest concern is when the body is stressed, all the hormones are stressed as well. So all our stress hormones will be elevated, and so that's why something like the dextrose or a multi-dextrose, which is super quick digesting, and then the whey. There's studies that show that whey can get into the muscles as quickly as 20 minutes. And so, you want to so at that point, I would imagine that the systems are somewhat calming down, but that's when you want to get in the nutrients the fastest you possibly can when the body is stressed post-workout. I think what you're trying to say too is it possible that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is the body transitioning, is the body still kind of working the muscles and it has no ability to break down the food? Is that kind of what you're going with that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And like I said, as long as it's quick digesting, if you throw in something like a fructose or you throw in something like a casein protein, those are going to be pretty slow digesting options.
Okay.
And one other thing is that those, the carbs that we talked about and the protein that we talked about empties the stomach very quickly. Because they're very simple sugars, and most of the wheys now are already pre-digested as they're hydrolyzed, they need very little digestion. And that's why those are kind of the premium ones, and those are the ones that we see in the recovery drinks, is that there's so little action that's required in the stomach, and it dumps it quickly kind of into the small intestines. What's important to note is that recovery happens in the muscle, not the stomach. And so we have to get the nutrients from the stomach, to the small intestines so we can get it to the muscle.
Awesome. Next question. What about body fat percentage? So if you're a leaner athlete, leaner by nature, and it's post-workout, is your ratio between carbohydrates and protein going to be similar to someone who might be able to have more body fat and they might be trying to lose body fat?
Absolutely. That's an awesome question. And one I get asked quite frequently. And yes, to answer that, two very different body types, two very different post-workout types. And so if somebody comes into the gym and their goal is for weight loss, okay, they're trying to lean out, they're carrying some body fat, post-workout, I actually probably wouldn't give them a carb. Or if I did give them a carb, I would make sure that I took it from their carb allotment. So, I tried to, so I maybe, some of the folks that I work with who are trying to lose weight, I'd give them their carbohydrates, but I'd put it around their workouts much more tightly, so then they would optimize them more. The difference between somebody who, carbohydrate, even number-wise, post-workout, we often would go by percentage of lean muscle mass. Okay, so if somebody is 200 pounds and 15% body fat, they're looking at roughly around 185 pounds of lean muscle mass. Okay, so if somebody is trying to lose weight, I would actually put the amount of carbohydrates they get after workout at 0.25. So for somebody roughly who's 185 pounds post-workout, you're looking at, probably 42 grams. If somebody's trying to lose weight, I would probably knock that down. On the flip side, if somebody's trying to gain mass, okay, somebody's trying to put on muscle, and somebody has a super intense workout, I take that 0.25 per pound of lean body mass and I bump that all the way up to 0.5. Okay, so there's definitely going to be a different type of range for people that carry more body fat. And the reason for that is that body fat is really kind of inertly dead. It doesn't do anything. It's not metabolically active, so we don't have to feed it. But post-workout, for people that are trying to lose weight or, really just kind of trying to lean out, I would give them some type of whey and then make sure that they're taking in branched hands while they're training.
Awesome. I think the last question I have that people might want to know is the post-workout always the same for every workout? So if someone comes in here and let's say it's like on a Wednesday and it's a longer kind of like 40-minute piece, is that going to be the same as if someone were to come in here on a Monday, which might be more heavy and shorter piece?
Yeah, and a lot of times when we base post-workout nutrition, in a fine-tuned way, we actually look at minutes of training and then we would kind of replenish based on recovery. And so if somebody's doing, a shorter duration workout, they haven't burned through their stores of carbohydrates. So glycogen is our storage form of carbohydrates. And so if somebody comes in and their workout sessions are short and they're not training hard, we don't really need there's not a reason to replete as heavy. For most competitors that are in here for, 2 to 3 hours a day, within probably that first hour and a half, if they haven't fueled properly before, they've tapped out their tank.
Gotcha.
And so just think about it like post-workout, that they're like, if your body's wrung out, you need to replete. So yeah, very, very, I always say different strokes for different folks, and it's just important to kind of individualize it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Aiden.
Thanks, man.
Hope you guys got some good information out of this. Next one, we'll look to tackle pre-workout.
Yes.
And how you should be fueling before the workouts, different times based off the individuals. And have a great weekend, guys.
Thank you.